Welcome back to another episode of the Amateur Hour podcast. My name is Jacob, and this episode will be a solo episode and will only be me discussing because this is a topic that I feel particularly passionate about in the wake of recent news. So what we've heard today is that Don Cherry has been fired from his position as a Hockey Night in Canada broadcaster and host of his own show, The Coach's Corner, after his rant about immigrants and about people wearing poppies in Canada. So on Saturday, during the first intermission of the Toronto Maple Leafs game, he said that he sees less and less people wearing poppies in Canada, but he immediately correlates this, fact that he's not really a fact, but from what he's noticed, he's immediately correlated less and less people wearing poppies in Canada to immigrants coming to Canada and immigrants not wearing poppies. He says this directly in this quote: "You people come here, you love our way of life, you love our milk and honey, at least you can pay a couple of bucks for a poppy or something like that. These guys paid for your way of life that you enjoy in Canada. These guys paid the biggest price." And then he went on to say that you great people or you great Canadians are the only people who bought poppies. So in a sense, what he's saying is that it is only the immigrants who have bought poppy, or is only the immigrants who are responsible for the lack of poppies that he's seeing in where he lives in Mississauga or in Toronto for where he was working. So only great Canadians bought poppies, but he's not at all saying that any immigrant who bought a poppy is a great Canadian, because he's saying all the immigrants who are not buying poppies and are simply reaping the benefits of living in Canada, which is completely untrue. And it's very racist. It's very insensitive what he said, and he said it on national TV on a very popular show. Like the Coach's Corner is a very well-known show, especially growing up in Canada. You grow up on Don Cherry, you grow up on Hockey Night in Canada, you grow up on the Coach's Corner. There is absolutely no excuse for Don Cherry saying something like this. There's no way you should be able to defend him. Sportsnet was absolutely 100% in the right to fire somebody like him. It's been a persistent issue over the years and over his broadcasting career, where he's been very insensitive towards non-Canadians, like especially Europeans who come play in the NHL, like Russians who come play in the NHL. He is very difficult on those kinds of players, and he always talks only about Canadians highly, but refuses to really give props to any other player of a different nation just because they are not Canadian. And he said racist things, he said very ignorant things in the past, but this is by far the worst thing he said, and this is absolutely calls for him to get fired from Sportsnet. There is no way of defending him. If you think that just simply because you grew up watching him, he's part of your life because you've watched him so long, and he's been on Hockey Night in Canada since 1986, and for that reason we should give him a pass for saying something like this, you are absolutely deluded. And you're flat out, honestly, if you defend Don Cherry, who is racist and ignorant, that makes you racist and ignorant. I don't really care what anybody says. I've seen a lot of defense for him online about, in 2019, everybody's such a pussy about saying what you want to say, and there's like free speech and stuff like that, or even people agreeing with Don Cherry about what he said about immigrants. Anybody like that who's defending Don Cherry, you are racist and ignorant. There's no beating around the bush with that. That is absolutely the case in this scenario. And even after Don Cherry got fired, he says, "I know what I said and I meant it." There is no excuse for what Don Cherry has said. There is no excuse for defending him just because he's been on TV for so long, just because he's a part of your life. If you honestly believe and are you believe what Don Cherry has said and you agreed what he has said, then you are flat out racist and you are not a true Canadian. True Canadians is anybody that lives in Canada. If you're part of the culture, immigrants come and enrich said culture. That makes you a Canadian. Buying simply a poppy does not make you Canadian. Buying a poppy does not simply put you in there for remembrance of veterans. What you can do to remember veterans, you can even donate, but you don't need to wear a poppy just to remember the veterans. That's not the only way of doing so. You can do so on a daily basis, 365 days for years, remembering the people that sacrificed themselves to give us the great country that we live in today. It is not simply wearing a poppy that does that. And just because you wear a poppy doesn't make you a good person in that regard. What you can do on a day-to-day basis to support veterans, to support life in Canada, to support the culture, makes you a good person and a good Canadian. Simply wearing a poppy for maybe 2 weeks in November of the year does not make you a good person. Like, just to round this off, for Don Cherry, you deserve to get fired. It's been coming for years. Your ignorance has been, swept under the rug just because of your reputation as this renowned hockey analyst. This was coming. This was, we've seen the tip of the iceberg all along, and this is the bottom of it. This is everything that you represent, all tied up into one. You absolutely deserve to be fired. Sportsnet were in the right. It is a great PR move for them. It would have looked awful to keep somebody like this on their network. And once again, I just want to reiterate, if anybody comes to Don Cherry's defense in this scenario, saying that 2019 is too soft, you can't say what you want to say. Like, I'm a man who will push the boundaries on humor, on anything. Like, I'm more like if anything goes, but this is too far. Racism on national TV and coming to the defense of somebody who's racist on national TV, or even agreeing with him. You are completely ignorant to the Canadian culture, and you are not a true and good Canadian. That's all I have to say on this situation. This is not the normal kind of content that we'll be dealing with on this podcast, but this is something that I would feel passionately about, and I feel that was needed to be said.